Hello again, friends, and welcome to the Learning Future podcast and this season on Education Transformed. Today, we have a wonderful guest and a good friend of mine, Lasse Leponiemi, who is the executive director at HundrED, based out of Finland. He's actually the co-founder and executive director of this Finnish mission-driven organization, which is dedicated to helping every single child in life flourish by giving them access to the best possible education innovations. They've been doing some wonderful work in over 100 countries now with networks of innovators and implementers. And as you'll hear, he's pretty passionate about kind of future, the youth orientation, and has worked in all sorts of different settings since 2006, although he looks very young, I have to say. Lasse, you look great. He's got an MBA in educational leadership from Tampere University of Applied Sciences, and he joins us from Helsinki today. Lasse, it's great to have you with us.
Thank you, Luca. And it's fantastic what you can do with those AI filters these days. So you can smoothen out the skin, and you can sound whoever you want.
Absolutely.
But you can maybe also look whoever you want. I was wondering, should I go with a frog face or rabbit or something? But let's keep it as it is.
I think, Lasse, one thing I'm learning, because this is my first question to you, is that you might not be Lasse, you might be an AI spun up version of Lasse. And, AI has broken kind of content verification this year. But what is one thing that you're learning through the work that you do, really at global levels around education, innovation, and beyond?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So as you know, one of the key things we do, we identify education innovations. And at the moment, we are actually in the middle of a review process of the global collection for 2024. So even though the next year is still quite far away, we are already kind of like identifying new solution practices around the world. And as we were discussing before the call, it actually is very much trending at the moment, like what you can do with AI in the field of education.
Yeah.
And then the second big piece, which has been remaining for the last few years, is the well-being of students and teachers. So I think like those are kind of like the key things we are looking with our education innovation research at the moment, and then how you combine those things with different things. So we are, for example, in Bangladesh, we are trying to identify edtech solutions that work in well-being, and together with the Finnish gaming company Supercell, we are actually looking gamified curriculums.
Interesting.
So how you can not only have a single, play-based application or game intervention for the learning, but can you actually gamify the way the school operates and how that will affect the learning and the whole school community. So those are some of the new things we are having on our plate at the moment, and let's see what comes out of those.
Right, it's fantastic. I really do love the work of HundrED, and I think the way that you've thought for a long period of time. And this season, as you know, is in collaboration with Salzburg Global Seminar, of which we're both fellows. And it's on education transformed, kind of in like a past tense. And so I wonder, with what you're seeing around the emergent themes, what does this idea of a transformed education really mean to you, as opposed to maybe like an improved education or like more iterated? What's that kind of mean for you as an educationalist, for you as someone that is really at the forefront of this education innovation space?
Yeah, I think like all of this started maybe 5 years ago.
Yeah.
So that is the moment when I remember hearing for the first time somebody using transform as a way to describe what we should be doing for education. And I actually quite a lot like the word, because if we are thinking about reimagining or kind of like somehow completely like blowing up the existing system and then building it back better, in many cases that is just not possible, but when we are transforming something, we are taking the existing elements, we are somehow modifying them, we are improving them. We might be, letting something go and then picking up something new. But eventually, like, we are still saying that the purpose of the education remains as important as it has been. We don't have to reimagine that, but we can kind of like improve the ways how we operate or how we help students to learn. And that's kind of like how I'm approaching the transformation discussion. And then when we work with the global education innovators, something that I'm actually quite happy to see around the world, many of these education providers, ministries, other kind of like governmental organizations are now discussing a lot more about the multidisciplinary subjects like creative thinking, social emotional learning, media literacy. And those are not anymore seen as a competing elements within the curriculum. They are seen as a complementing elements for the traditional subjects. And we are starting to understand that as the AI is shaping the way how we operate, how the societies are changing, we have to be building those new skills and competencies to the students so that they can, succeed in the future work life and personal life.
Yeah. Mate, there's a lot to click on there, but I want to just bring us back to one thing you said before, like the idea of letting some things go, because clearly the work of 100 and it's looking at the kind of the emerging future, which are these innovative models across all contexts, low income, high income, majority world, minority world, etc. What are some things that, in your view, because you could almost have like an anti-100, right? Get this, which is like legacy practices that
we reduce every year 100 solutions from the world.
Yeah, well, from the past should no longer be taken. Wouldn't that be an interesting counter? Do you know what I mean? What are some of the things when you clearly see what's emerging? What do you think we need to let go of across our education systems?
Mm-hmm. That might be actually the most difficult conversation that everybody is trying to avoid in the field of education. So, for example, every time we are part of the curriculum development discussions, people are always saying that, and then we need to add this, but nobody dares to say, but actually we have to take something out. And as we are kind of like thinking about it, we still have 24 hours in a day, and we still have the, some amount of days in a school year. So we have to take something out. We cannot only add new things. And that's kind of like the very, very challenging thing for us to understand. But it's also a very political discussion. When we go to different countries and we work with different systems, many, teachers might be feeling worried if we have a discussion what should we reduce from the curriculum, because it means eventually somebody will lose a lesson that they have been teaching for a classroom for maybe decades.
Yes.
But how I would actually kind of like approach this is that how we should shape the way or how we facilitate the learning in the classroom. So already now we kind of like see, let's think about ICT classes, for example. So when we are learning like different kind of IT skills, those classes has been transforming throughout the last decades. So nobody is anymore, using those old softwares that were used maybe in early 2000 or late 90s in a school context.
Yeah.
But we are using something different. So in a similar way, we should be modifying the content we are having in our curriculum. So now when we are, for example, approaching, if we kind of like keep talking about the AI, we should be maybe kind of like adding stuff how you can use AI in a mindful way to support you learning and support you doing the work you should be doing, because all of us most likely will be using some kind of AI solutions to support us and help us to navigate through our professional and personal lives in the future. Whether it's the Google navigation in your phone or something which is using the data to create the most optimized route for you.
Yeah.
And we should understand how those things work. But then what we should take out of the picture is maybe like how much it makes sense to learn something by heart, how much it makes sense to use a lot of time to kind of like learn very deeply some existing solutions or applications or like this kind of like technical languages, or would it make more sense to trying to understand how these things have been created, what are the structures behind of those, and for sure we need to have those basic skills also in the future. We cannot kind of like skip, literacy skills or numeracy skills.
Yeah.
But then are we able to change the way how we learn those skills? That's the interesting thing for me, because it might be so that we are able to accelerate the learning, or maybe we should actually pause on some things or some kind of learning situations more. For example, when we are learning socio-emotional skills.
Yeah.
And actually a concept I was discussing with one of our 100 innovators, Deepak Ramola from Project Fuel.
Mm-hmm.
And he said something interesting, because in a startup world, in an innovation world, we often talk about MVPs, minimum viable products. And Deepak was saying, like, I have been creating a new way to approach MVP. And for me, it's these days most valuable pause. And I think like when we are very, busy in our lives,
interesting.
I think like something that we should be kind of like learning is to have those pauses, how we, stop for a moment and we think, and if I would need to add something to the curriculum, maybe that is a skill I would like to kind of like underline the importance of it, because it also helps with the emotional and well-being.
Oh, Lasse, where do we start with that answer? Well, first of all, ICT.
I changed the whole question and answered, whatever I wanted. So
no, mate, it's fine.
This was like Tony McKay's facilitation for a panel discussion, where he was saying, like, you can answer to this question or any other question you were thinking about.
No, mate, there's a lot of powerful themes there. Let's start with the pause aspect, because I'm a big fan of Andrew Huberman in the Huberman Lab, and he's a neuroscientist at Stanford, and he really talks about the power of pause. Even a 10-second pause in the middle of a learning activity kind of gives your brain time to catch up, and then like the dendrites in the neural pathways, the neurogenesis that's going on in your brain to actually map. And yet so rarely do we find space to pause anymore, because we'll fill it with entertainment or with information, or we just get our phone out. There was a time, I think you and I are both old enough just to remember when, you'd be standing in a line for something and you would talk to the person next to you because you were present to the kind of world that you're in.
Yeah.
Whereas now, why not? Whereas now you're talking, but to people, connecting with people all over the place. And it adds something, but it removes something. And this most valuable pause idea is so interesting, not least of all because of the open letter, of course, that was written by a lot of the AI researchers. We're recording this in May, and AI, of course, is exploding around us. And they said we need to pause AI development for 6 months so we can work out the ethical frame. Now, I'm an optimist, but I'm not optimistic that that's going to take place. But this idea of the pause is a really beautiful way to think about the purpose of schools and the purpose of education as being kind of truly human-centered. And your piece around, yes, literacy and numeracy, but how they are learnt and the kind of the art of learning, not just the science of it. That's what I'm really curious about.
How do you make that personalized? How do you make it personalized for the students, but also for teacher? And that's also maybe kind of like another aspect that we don't talk enough, in my opinion. Yeah. We talk a lot about personalized learning, and we kind of like see that that's something that should take place as a part of the learning facilitation and the process of learning. But what we do not talk about that much is that, like, how do we do personalized teaching? Because as much as the students are having, their own ways of learning, so do the teachers have, and so do teachers have the most efficient and great ways to facilitate the learning process. And when we are discussing like how these different solutions, applications, learning backend systems might benefit the students, I think it would be very crucial to also think like how those can take the kind of like to give the room to the best learning facilitation the teacher can be giving in that situation, and how they can guide the teacher, and how it can be part of their professional development. As we are talking about that our students should be lifelong learners, so should we. And that's kind of like something that kind of like excites me quite a bit. We did a spotlight on a formative assessment. So assessment about learning, and assessment how the students can learn the best in different situations. And I think that kind of like professional development should be kind of like much more present for the teachers, because then that can that can kind of like open up totally new kind of avenues for learning. And it can give room for having those pauses or having kind of like more focus time on some certain things, which can be because that data would be available for us if we would know where to look at. And sometimes in education sector we talk about big data. And I actually I'm not a big fan of the big data. I actually think that small data might be much more valuable in the classroom setting, because that small data can help us to understand how do different students in the classroom learn, what kind of things they find challenging or difficult. But if we only look at big numbers, we lose those nuances, which are very, very important when we are trying to personalize the learning. And that's something that I hope that people would remember when they're thinking about how to utilize data as a part of the learning process.
I love that so much, Lasse. The power of small data, and to really understand the story. And I do think we are somewhat, I guess, like allured by big data and think, wow, I've got these data points and this is the whole country or the whole state or the whole school. But of course, it doesn't really inform us from the formative perspective. Like, well, okay, what are the behaviors as an educator that we need to put in place for this learner at this moment? And I guess this piece on personal, I really like your reflection on, personal teaching, personalized teaching. That's such a powerful thing. It's the same, of course, with well-being in our work. We've noticed, people are obsessed with student well-being. Well, that's critical, but it's not the whole piece. It's a human organization. So how does it become a well-being oriented ecosystem, right? That's got obviously like rigor and stretch and struggle, but ultimately it's got flourishing at its core and collective flourishing. Because if a teacher is burnt out, they're not going to be able to teach their best to students and maximize student well-being. And yet we've kind of, I think, engaged in this Faustian bargain where that's what we do. Kind of the teachers sacrifice themselves for the academic outcomes of the young people, as opposed to everyone thinking about this in a more holistic way. We had a great conversation about agency as well, Lasse, and I'd like us to kind of visit the future for this little piece, because our work at the Learning Future, we're really interested in what are the principles that are emerging, and of course, how do you apply those to school design and strategic design, or kind of the future of leadership skills, or whatever the case might be. And so you look at things like agency, for example, which for me is just a construct that will be one of the leading constructs into the future of learning. Like, can young people self-direct, self-determine their learning and self-determination theory? But of course, we forget about the educators once more. We're like, student agency, but actually, what about the agency of an educator within a system? Do they feel empowered to do their best work consistently? If not, why not? How do we create a liberatory structure and system in that can kind of not be so hierarchical or lockstep? What's your reflections and your work, across the world about that, the agency that kind of needs to be activated, I guess, with educators as well as with young people?
If you think about the word agency, it means that, you are self-directing yourself and you are feeling belonging to the environment and the circumstances where you operate, right?
Yeah.
But then something that is missing from that word is, how does your behavior and the way you operate and the way you act in that environment affect to others? So I think like the key thing to add here is co-agency.
Right.
So when we are working as a social unit, when we are working as a group of people, whatever we do always affect to others. And sometimes we might be reading, from the newspapers or from social media, that somebody has been really having agency for the activities they have been doing in a neighborhood, but they haven't been really paying attention how that will affect to others. They might have been parking their car somewhere in the wrong place, or they have been, throwing their trash out because that has helped, them, but then somebody else needs to be picking those things and, taking care of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But if we think about co-agency, then we are seen as responsible together to create something and work as a one kind of like united a group of people towards the same common goals. And I think that's very important. And as a even younger education professional, I was once visiting, which maybe 7 years ago, in one Finnish school, when we were discussing about co-teaching, because it was a part of the new curriculum of Finland that was introduced in 2016.
Yeah.
And then there was this a little bit older history teacher who took the USB driver from his pocket and said, like, young man, why would I borrow this USB stick to anyone else in my school? It has all my exams, all my course materials, everything I have been building in last 30 years. Why would I give this to someone because it belongs to me? And it kind of like really clearly underlines that, like, how in this kind of, like, if this is the culture you are having, it's very challenging to create a sense of belonging, working together, and introducing even a teamwork. If everybody are so afraid of giving something out that they have been creating and hoping that in return they might be actually receiving something that they would not know how to do. And I think that's the key. When we think about co-agency, it's not only about doing whatever you want and create kind of a, like, that kind of like a very selfish bubble around you. Individualistic way of being and doing. Actually, we have to be letting go some of the power, some of our own decisions, in order to be able to have a healthy relationships and good working team spirit, work culture, school culture, wherever we are. So it's not a one-way street, and we have to have an active dialogue with others. And for that reason, I would always like to add co-agency to that.
It's great. I mean, I think it's a wonderful reflection, I think, Lasse. And I think about the Education 2030 project as well from the OECD and their Learner Compass, which is co-agency really built into it. And not surprisingly, a lot of the work that we do is co-design, because, similarly, it's, is a principal designing a plan and giving it to the team, or, teachers designing a unit and then giving it to the students, as opposed to all of us kind of using our collective wisdom, intelligence, experience to build something that's unique because it has all of our consciousness and our perspectives baked into it. We find it the most powerful way to enable transformation in schools, particularly around strategic design and cultural shifts. This idea of that there is no real separation, as much as we pretend that there might be. We live in a system.
And there are kind of good examples. Like if we forget to do co-designing and we do a classroom design, and then, the students are coming back to a classroom and the architect has been thinking that I will put the sink behind the door when it's opened up. So it's not, in a way, and then it doesn't, it's not, something that you will see the first time you come in. Well, what happens when the students come in and they should wash their hands? The sink is on the wrong side of the door and it creates a roadblock. It's in the corner, very neatly done. And then, there is no way the students can easily go and wash their hands because they will be colliding to each other and then half of them don't wash their hands. If you would be putting the sink on the other side of the door, you open up the door, students come in, they wash their hand and they go to their seat. Beautiful. And all washed their hands. And it's like a one very small kind of design fall from the user perspective. Which could have been solved in 5 minutes if there would have been co-designing for the room. So this kind of like a very small things can change a lot how well the school operates or the learning environment operates. And for that reason, I think like the co-designing and whatsoever is extremely important, so that we would be more open to have these discussions and kind of like creating ways that work for the end user or for the student in the best possible way.
Fantastic. Lasse, it's such a tangible example. And I think that language there of like design features in a physical space, I think it's really, it makes it so practical for all of us. We can imagine the problem and the solution. And so, because I think you're so well placed and you really are mapping and elevating the kind of leading innovations around the world in education. If we're sitting down having this conversation as older men, hopefully still fit and able as we are, or whatever, in say 2036, 13 years, someone starts school this year, they graduate in that year, for example. What do you think some of the design features are of education systems? What can you imagine if we have this education transformed reality as one of the scenarios, maybe the preferred future in our view? What are some of the features of education systems? Like what's shifted? What principles underlie, and I'm thinking back to your idea of co-agency being one of the features of that new system, right? That's been designed, the kind of minimum viable system, right? Or the most preferred system, the MPS, whatever the language might be. What would you say to that?
My hope and dream is that the grade levels would disappear. So when we would go deeper to personalized learning and teaching experiences, potentially we could see different kind of ways to grouping the students and their competencies in different fields. And then the school could be more flexible as the world is more flexible and the way how we work is becoming more and more flexible at the moment. Yeah. So why couldn't school be flexible as well? So what that could mean is that, like, for example, we have a lot of talking about inclusive learning at the moment, and we think like, how do we should kind of like have the special learners as a part of the normal school communities, how we should kind of like do all of that. And there has been very heated discussions about that in Finland. And sometimes I'm thinking like, what if the way how we are trying to do this is completely kind of like broken for the future world? What if we would kind of like be able to kind of like think somehow creating the students or kind of like putting them into right learning pockets in different ways, like why we have only one learning pocket which is called grade 2 or grade 3 or grade 4. What if that could be divided on a different levels so that the learning could happen in more collaborative environment, and at the same time allowing the students to create their own social circles and find the friends from the school community. Why do we trap them in a way to those grades? And then we think that this is the way how the learning should happen, because it's just something that we have created, a decades ago, that we think like during this year, these are the things I should be learning. And I think like for some of the special learners, especially those are challenging, but also those might be very challenging for the ones who have more tendencies to learn math or whatever. So then they are in a way once again like trapped with the things that they don't find interesting in that particular subject, because they could be already moving forward. And I think that is one of the key challenges what we should be thinking how to solve it. Somebody could maybe do the primary school in 6 years, 7 years. Somebody could take 12. And if the end result would be that both of them find opportunities for meaningful life and contribution in our societies, I think that would be beautiful.
Mate, that's fantastic. I can really see the vision. I mean, and I think if we go far enough out, this idea that a humanized education would mean every human is seen as irreducibly unique and therefore kind of beyond categorization. And it's interesting how small versus big data comment. It means that small data and qualitative data would be so elevated to say this is the qualities of this human being. and they are ready for this level of instruction. I think AI will, if we design it properly, kind of enable us to do that well. But yeah, even the whole idea, will we even have school in 2050? That's a really provocative question. Or will we have these different types of hybrid learning environments or global giants, or will there be a return back to that which is most human? I mean, if you think pre-industrial era, we used to learn in multi-generational ways, intergenerationally. There would always be the elders with the young ones, and then the kind of adolescents, and everyone would kind of be in this learning situation in a village setting. And we've kind of now what we've done is say, okay, well, let's take all the young ones, let's put them all together and try to stop them from killing each other in some ways, or let's get them all kind of learning with each other, as opposed to like the mentoring, the growth. And I feel like there's a really powerful insight to that. Well, mate, I look forward to
if you think about like the learning environment designing at the moment, so at least what we are seeing is that like that starting to happen in some ways. So we might be seeing, for example, kindergartens which are created in the same building with the senior housing.
Yeah.
So then you're kind of like having more of that like intergenerational collaboration, or it's easier to organize. So we are seeing like some community spaces are brought to the same buildings with the schools. So it provides like more possibilities to do something with the families and have the parental engagement as a part of the there's a natural element of the learning community as well. And I think like all of those are needed. All of these elements are needed, and I'm kind of like hoping that we wouldn't see the school or these learning places as a separate units where we kind of like send our kids and they are out of harm's way for some amount of hours and then they are coming back to home. But we should hopefully see them more as a part of our kind of like community, so that they are not isolated, but those buildings and those facilities could be also used in many different ways. And I think like that could also be very important from the economical point of view. Like we build schools which might be then empty for 2 to 3 months a year when those facilities are not used for anything. And I find that as a huge waste. So we should be able to kind of like find ways to kind of like collaborate more with the learning organizations and the campuses and all of that, so that those could be part of our everyday lives in different ways.
I love it, Lasse, and both you and I quite connected to kind of the frame of learning ecosystems, and I really think one thing that is guaranteed is a shift away from the school as a single institution where you go from 8:30 to 3:30 towards this idea of a full learning ecosystem that's informal, non-formal, like life wide, life deep, lifelong, different communities coming in, like a kind of a co-working space hub, like, really redesigning that. And these learning precincts that we are seeing kind of being built out across the world, not just in the startup space, but in the educational space. It would be interesting. You go to kindergarten and then you end up in the old folks' home, that's across the road, and you go, and that kind of becomes much more of a village cyclical orientation, I think, to the arc of our lives and our contribution. And so I hope, mate, in 2036 or whatever the framing was I used, we can sit down and have a conversation, see how close we were, and if the dream has come to pass in some ways. It's been wonderful to chat with you, as always. My final question is, what is your take-home message? What would you like to resonate in the minds of our wonderful listeners? Thank you for listening. From your standpoint, when you look across the horizon of education futures, of transformation?
I think I will steal that MVP concept from Deepak and remember to have your minimum viable pause.
It's beautiful.
And and use that moment to think about something that you like, or something that that has been wandering you, or just to do nothing. Relax your mind for a moment, and then you are able to move forward and do something more challenging in the next moment. So maybe that's kind of like the message I hope people would remember.
Minimum viable pause. Thank you very much, Lasse. I'm going to take that into my day tomorrow. Thank you for sharing the work that you're doing, your perspective, from 100, but also beyond. Congratulations on becoming a father. That's not public news really, but it's fabulous journey. So now it's all personal for you. But yeah, it's been wonderful to have you as part of this Education Transform series.
Yes, and now you understand why these pauses are so important for me.
Absolutely, mate. Go well.
All right. Hey, thanks for this, Luca. This was a lot of fun.
Fantastic, Lasse. Really fantastic. I love the work that you're doing. So good, and I think the way you look at Education Transformed, and the really poignant piece that I'm taking away is how do you get people to let go, and do less? Like, how do we support schools and systems, you and I, and organization, our work for the decades to come, to really be bold in letting go of stuff? Because it feels like everyone doesn't want to touch the sacred cow, and let go of it, kill the faculty structure or the grade levels. People lose their minds, but yeah, there's boldness ahead, I think.
Very good. All right. But hey,
I'll leave it to it, mate.
Means that we have some work to do.
We always work to do.
Thanks so much.
I'll see you later this year.
Always work to do.
It's always a pleasure. Go well.
Thanks. Bye-bye.